Well, after 5 months of ownership of the Kobra 3 Max, I can tell you it's been an interesting ride. There's been some wins and some aggravations. I've made some changes, and there are still some changes I'd like to make. So in this video, we're going to cover all of those, and we'll start from the very beginning. So when I first purchased the printer, I knew there were some things I would want to change right away. So Anycubic, even though this machine was running Clipper, was closed off. And the only way you could print to the machine was using Anycubic's version of Orca Slicer, which I wouldn't necessarily have a problem with if it was actually Orca Slicer. It's Orca, an older version. It didn't have any of the filament profiles that Orca has, and it only had support for one nozzle, the 0.4. That was it. So everything else was up to me. Now I could build a bunch of, or try to import a bunch of filament profiles, or I can just figure out how to make this machine work with Orca. And that's exactly what I did. One of the first changes I ever made to this machine was to install a community firmware called Ring Calls. That opens the door and allows you to access the machine with Orca through Clipper. And that's a good investment. I would do it again if I needed to. Also was able to find a 0.6 and a 0.8 nozzle on the internet, even though they weren't officially Anycubic nozzles. And I had to build myself the profiles for those nozzles. So if you're not a tinkerer, this is definitely a ding against this machine. Another thing you're going to deal with is VFAs. I think you kind of had to expect that, right? Anything with a gantry this tall is going to have issues. Now, I will say that there's a good possibility that some of the VFA issues I've had have been directly related to the fact that it was on one of those popular standing desks. I noticed if I rotated the printer around that the VFAs got a little bit better. They didn't go away by any means, but they got better. So, advice number 2, buy yourself a very, very sturdy table to put it on, and maybe even bolt it to the wall. Like, this machine moves a lot of weight, and from the factory it attempts to move quite fast. So I've found that just slowing the machine down a little bit helps a ton on improving the print quality. But after owning it just, I think, 2 months, I began to see some strange behavior. I was doing a print that was about 24 hours. It was part of my spool tower, the base of my spool tower, which took about 24 hours to print. Now, because of the situation with the VFAs, I really wanted it to look good, so I applied a fuzzy skin on the outside of the model. I started the print and everything was going well. I may have been like 25% in, and then I went to bed. Now, I know we all should not leave our printers running overnight, but I think we all do it, don't we? I get up in the morning and the printer had stopped. There was an error on the screen that said MCU head communication error. So I took a picture of it, and then I exported the logs and sent them to Anycubic to see what they had to say. Now, what goes on here, understand, I don't blame Anycubic support. These guys are just doing their job, and they're reading from the script that they're given to do the steps they have to do. So back and forth with them, trying to determine what's going on with the machine. And during that process, because there's like a 12-hour thing where I send them a message at 9 o'clock in the morning and it's 9 o'clock at night there. So obviously there's a delay. So a couple of days back and forth, and I decide, well, while I'm waiting for an answer on that, I'll go ahead and just print the job again, and we'll just deal with no fuzzy skin. So I start to print up, and again, it gets to about 50%. It's almost done. I decide to go ahead and go to bed. It'd be finished up by morning. When I come back in the morning to check on the print, the printer had stopped again. This time, a different error. The bed had stopped heating during the process. The print had detached from the bed at that point, so, that was another wasted print that you throw in the garbage. Now, mind you, these are half a spool, these jobs, so Now, a couple of times I've thrown away a pretty substantial amount of filament. I go ahead and take a screenshot of that error and export the logs and send it to Anycubic. I did notice that if the bed was pulled forward and I commanded the bed to heat, it would heat. But if I was to push it back, it would stop heating. So obviously we have some kind of short in the main harness, or something's going on with the bed. So I report it to Anycubic and wait for an answer. They go through their process and they're asking me to test this and test this and test this. I decide maybe I'll just shortcut all this and say, you know what, that short in the bed, and I'm not really comfortable with plugging the machine in anymore. I'm not really sure what's going on with it, and I don't think it's safe. Now, that was just the answer I gave. Obviously, if I had the parts to swap out, I would swap the parts out. But they were going to send me through 3 or 4 more days of doing this and doing that, and that was just the easiest way to get to the end. At that point, they had offered to send me to sales, but they couldn't guarantee that sales would do anything for me. I said, go ahead and send me to sales. I'll take my chances. When I get to sales, they had offered me 2 options. One was they would send me a new print head cable, a new main harness, a new motherboard, and a new fully assembled bed. That's pretty much replacing the whole printer at that point. Oh, and they offered a $10 refund. The other option was that I pack up the old printer, send it back, and then they would send me a new printer when the old one arrived. Even though it would probably have been faster to just swap out all the parts, at this point I felt like I had too many things going on, and maybe this printer was built on a Friday and there was just too much going on with it. So I told them, go ahead and just send me a new printer. I'll pack up this old one, I'll ship it wherever you want me to ship it to, and they provided me a label. Thank you very much for that. And the only thing I had to pay for was the box, because I didn't keep the original box. I probably should have, but it's a giant box, and where are you going to put it? So the printer arrives in California, and when it gets there, they immediately dispatch a new printer. It comes from New Jersey, only a couple states away. So within 3 days, I have my new printer. Now, so far, this printer has been a lot better. Matter of fact, the VFAs are quite a bit better, and everything about the printer just makes me feel a little more warm and fuzzy, right? It's a new printer. It's not the repaired old one. I did have to go through and adjust the tension on the wheels, make sure all the belts were right. These are things you just can't overlook. But after making those adjustments and slowing things down a little bit, I've been extremely happy with the results. Now, 2 things that have really bugged me about this printer have been physical parts on it. One of them is the retainer clip on the side that holds the PTFE tube, and it's supposed to hold the print head data cable, but it won't stay in place. You put it in, the head moves around, the cable comes out, and it just annoys me to no end. I finally decided to go in CAD and redesign that clip so it would properly retain the cable, and it would give me some additional options as far as running filament into the machine. Now, if you're interested in that part, it's available at ExtrusionTherapy.com, and you just tap on downloads and you can download it for free. The other part that kind of annoys me at this point, it wasn't too bad in the beginning, but it seems like the older the printer gets, the more it begins to sag, and that's just the data cable and the PTFE tube themselves. They kind of hang to the front and they just keep getting closer to the bed. I haven't found a good solution for that yet. I've done a couple prototypes, but they've been super awkward and just not quite what I was looking for. So I'll keep you guys posted. If I do come up with some kind of solution for that I think is acceptable, I'll obviously share it on my website. So what's my final take on this machine after 5 months? Well, if you're in the Bamboo ecosystem, the kind of all set it up and done for you ecosystem, this printer probably isn't for you. And if you're relatively new, but you're open to more open source machines, this probably still isn't for you yet. it would be a pretty frustrating first experience to deal with the amount of tweaking and dialing in that this machine requires. Now, if you're a hobbyist and you consider yourself a hobbyist, I think you're going to be okay here. I don't think it takes so much work to give you a decent result that it makes it unviable. And if you want to print to 420 millimeters by 420 by 500, this is one of the only machines, or maybe the only machine out there that can do that. So it might be worth it. Now understand, it will never be perfect, and it can't print at the level of my P1P or my X1C. This machine I use for very large, bulky parts. I don't depend on the geometry to be absolutely perfect. As a matter of fact, I can print something on my P1P and the geometry will be exactly as I expected. I can print it on this printer and it will be larger or smaller than expected. Now, if it's your only printer, then obviously you build your geometry around your printer. But it is nice when I design something, I print it on a P1P, I print it on one of my FlashForge Adventurer 5Ms or my X1C, and they all come out the same. So if you are new and you're just kind of hell-bent on, I'm buying the Anycubic Kobra 3 Max, my recommendation to you is keep it on the stock firmware and use Anycubic Slicer. You might not even notice the limitations at first. When you know it's time to make some changes is when the limitations are easily identified. Use it box stock for a while, and then when you realize this is a problem, then seek to fix it. Don't necessarily buy it and just because Roger said you should do this, do that to it, and actually create yourself a steeper learning curve. I hope you found this information helpful, and I really wanted to do this video, and I've been kind of struggling with it for the last couple of days because I really do like the printer, and I don't know that I would buy it again, but I do like the printer, and I accept the limitations that it represents. It's kind of odd. It's a love-hate relationship, you know? When a big print comes off of it and it looks amazing, I'm super happy with it. And then when the times it fails and is a pain in my butt, yeah, I'm not real happy with it at that point. So, you know, to each his own. I know some people, and people will probably get in the comments and say, I've not had a problem with my Anycubic Kobra 3 Max, or that Kobra 3 Max is a piece of crap. You know, a lot of people have been unhappy with it. But it's one of those things, you're taking on something that requires tweaking. And if you decide to do that, then you can't be mad when you have to tweak on it. If you want foolproof printing, this isn't your guy. All right, guys. Appreciate you. Later.